So we've sped up a bit to talk about hardware because it's such an exciting topic. And actually hardware, this is quite funny by the way, cameraman Harry is falling about all over the place in the waves. So this could be quite an interesting edit. But going back to hardware generally, most people will recognise as computers. Everyone uses a laptop these days or a mobile phone. And in that context, you understand the implications of it. And again, if you boil hardware down into its constituent components, it's fairly standard. There are some nuances to it, which I won't go into, but the most common aspects are three main things. Oh, it's quite difficult. So, the three things are, all hardware generally has a CPU, which is like the brain. So the better the CPU, the faster the hardware works. And by working, what I mean is, the faster it calculates things, the faster it does processing. So when you're buying hardware, it's worth understanding how quick it is, and that's generally about CPU type characteristics. The second sort of attribute is memory. Now, if you think about this in the context of a human body, if the CPU is a brain, then RAM is the memory. And so if you've got a really good memory as a human, you can very quickly process information, you can recall information, and it's the same as a computer. The bigger the RAM, the more memory it's got, and therefore the quicker it can remember facts. And that's a very simple way of thinking, if I'm buying a piece of hardware, big brain, big CPU, or fast CPU, big memory, that's a good thing. That means it goes quick. And if you think about hardware that you use in your daily lives, your mobile phone has probably got a reasonably quick CPU, but not as quick as a professional computer, a server. And your mobile phone has got a reasonably large amount of memory because it needs quick access to information. And then there's a third category that is in hardware, and that's storage, also known as disk, but that's a bit old-fashioned these days. And what that is, in human terms, is like a notepad. So you've got a piece of hardware, you've got a really big brain, you've got a load of memory, and sometimes you can't remember everything, so you have a notepad, which you can record and read information from, and it'll load into memory so it knows what to do. And in mobile phone sort of analogies, this is where you store your photos, that's on a disk. And that's because the computer doesn't need to remember all of your photos or your mobile phone, so disk drive space is useful for things it doesn't need to remember all the time, but if you want access to a lot of information, you need a big disk drive. Now, I'm oversimplifying hardware there, but I think just understanding the constituent parts is a good thing. Now, from a procurement perspective, it's quite important to think from a hardware perspective what you need to consider. If you're buying hardware, there's a number of factors. It's quite large areas of consideration. At its simplest form, most hardware is made abroad, it's made using rare materials, and that can have sustainability impacts. It can be difficult to get hold of those materials. And so if you're buying things, you need to probably factor in a bit of a lead time to have a device manufactured and make sure it's shipped correctly. At the other end of the scale, you bought your device, your piece of hardware, you need to keep it maintained. And the older the device, because technology changes so frequently, the more difficult it is to maintain it. And there's a whole industry geared up around maintaining hardware that is really driving a lot of cost in businesses. So understanding the maintenance requirements for your hardware is a really key part of procurement. Now, there's a whole topic around warranties and access to spares and installation and those sorts of things, which I'll talk about later. But fundamentally, if you're buying hardware, you need to think about how big and powerful it is, CPU, RAM, disk, and how quickly you can get it to site, what the implications are of buying a physical device that you're going to use in your estate.